quiet petrol station in the Swedish countryside. A scream that pierces the afternoon silence. A tattooed biker covered in leather and scars. And a terrified little girl who whispers four desperate words. Please pretend you're my father. Before we dive into this story, let me ask you something. When was the last time you showed kindness to a complete stranger? If you believe one act of kindness can change everything, hit that like button right now and drop a comment saying, "Stay safe, Sophie." Because today's story is about how one man's choice to be kind didn't just save one life. It changed an entire community. Now, let's get started. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in October. The kind of day where the sky hangs low and gray over the Swedish countryside, and the wind carries the smell of rain that hasn't fallen yet. Victor Bergström was at a Shell petrol station just outside Västerås. One of those lonely places where the highway cuts through endless forests and farmland. The kind of place where you stop for fuel and coffee, then disappear back into the quiet. Victor was filling up his motorcycle. A big, black beast of a bike that rumbled like thunder. He wore a leather vest covered in patches, the Iron Wolves MC. 20 years he'd been riding with them. 20 years of being the man people crossed the street to avoid. And then he heard it. A scream. High-pitched. Terrified. Coming from inside the petrol station shop. Victor's body reacted before his mind caught up. 20 years on the streets had taught him to recognize real fear. This wasn't some argument. This wasn't drama. This was danger. He moved toward the shop, his boots heavy on the pavement. But before he reached the door, a little girl burst out, running at full speed, blonde hair flying behind her, face streaked with tears. She was maybe 6 years old, and she was running straight toward him. "Please," she gasped, grabbing his hand with both of hers. Her little fingers were trembling. "Please pretend you're my father." Victor froze. In his entire life, no one had ever asked him to be anything close to a father figure. He was the guy mothers pulled their children away from. The guy shopkeepers watched nervously. The guy who made people uncomfortable just by existing. But this little girl was clinging to him like he was her only hope in the world. "Please," she whispered again, pressing herself against his leg. And then Victor saw him. A man in his mid-30s stepped out of the shop. Jeans. A neat jacket. Clean-shaven. He looked completely ordinary, the kind of man you wouldn't look at twice in a crowd. Except for his eyes. Cold. Calculating. Scanning the petrol station like a predator searching for prey. The little girl trembled behind Victor's legs. "He's not my father," she whispered, so quietly Victor almost didn't hear her. "He took me from the playground. Please don't let him take me again." Something inside Victor's chest turned to stone. He didn't need to hear another word. He put himself between the girl and the man. His massive body, built from decades of hard living, became a wall of leather, tattoos, and muscle. The man's eyes landed on them. For a moment, he just stood there, calculating his options. Then he started walking over, a smile spreading across his face. But it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sophie, sweetheart," the man said, his voice smooth and practiced. "You scared me. Come here." The girl's grip on Victor's hand tightened so hard it hurt. Victor's voice came out low. "Dangerous. She doesn't want to go with you." The man's smile stayed fixed in place. "I'm her uncle. She's just upset because I wouldn't buy her sweets. You know how children are." But Victor had spent decades reading people in situations where reading them wrong could get you killed. In bars where a wrong look meant a fight. In deals where trust was a currency you couldn't afford to waste. This man was lying. Everything about him screamed predator. Victor looked down at the girl without taking his eyes off the man. "Sophie, is this your uncle?" "No," she whispered. "I've never seen him before today." The man's face hardened. The fake kindness melted away like frost under sunlight. "Listen, friend," he said, his voice turning cold. "This doesn't concern you. Sophie, come here. Now." Victor pulled out his phone with his free hand. "Then you won't mind if I call the police and let them sort this out." That's when everything changed. The man's mask dropped completely. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket, fast. But Victor's body responded faster. Muscle memory from years of bar fights and street wars. He stepped forward, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted hard. The man yelped. Something fell from his pocket. Not a weapon. A phone. It hit the ground, screen up. And for just a second, before it locked, Victor saw a message on the screen that made his blood run ice cold. Got another one. Blonde, 6 years old. Meeting at warehouse, 1900 hours tonight. Victor's vision went red. In the motorcycle club world, There were lines you didn't cross. Rules even outlaws followed. And hurting children? That was the one thing that would unite every club in the country against you. Victor looked down at Sophie, at her tear-streaked face, at the way she was holding on to him like he was the only safe thing in the world. And in that moment, Victor Bergstrom, the man society had written off as dangerous, as a criminal, as someone to fear, made a choice. He chose kindness. "Listen to me very carefully," Victor said, his voice like gravel. "You're not going anywhere. And neither is she." The man tried to pull away. Victor's grip tightened until bones ground together. "You move again," Victor said quietly, "and I break it. Understand?" Sophie was crying softly behind him. Victor softened his voice, something he hadn't done in years. "Hey, sweetheart. What's your real name?" "Sophie," she whispered. "Sophie Anderson." "Okay, Sophie. I'm Victor. And I promise you, this man will never hurt you or anyone else. Ever again." And then, with his free hand still gripping the predator's wrist, Victor made a phone call. Not to the police. Not yet. He called someone who could move faster. The phone rang twice before a rough voice answered. "Bergstrom, this better be important." "Odin," Victor said, his voice steady despite the rage burning through him. "I need the crew at the Shell station outside Västerås. Right now." There was a pause. Bjorn Odin Larsson had been riding with the Iron Wolves longer than anyone. He knew Victor's voice. And he knew when something was seriously wrong. "What's the situation?" "Child trafficking," Victor said quietly, so Sophie wouldn't hear the full weight of those words. "And I need it handled before this piece of garbage makes a phone call. We're rolling." 5 minutes. The man Victor was holding tried to pull away again. Victor's grip tightened until the man gasped in pain. "I told you not to move." Sophie was still pressed against Victor's legs, shaking. He could feel her little body trembling. "Sophie," Victor said gently, "I need you to be brave for me, okay? My friends are coming. They look scary, but they're good men. They're going to help keep you safe." "Okay," she whispered. Within 5 minutes, the sound of motorcycle engines filled the air. Deep, rumbling growls that echoed across the empty petrol station. 6 Harleys pulled in, ridden by men who looked like they'd stepped straight out of a nightmare. Leather vests covered in patches. Tattoos crawling up their necks and arms. Scars that told stories of hard lives and harder fights. But Sophie didn't run. Maybe because Victor was still holding her hand. Maybe because even a 6-year-old could tell the difference between men who looked dangerous and men who were actually dangerous to her. Bjorn Odin Larsson got off his bike first. He was a massive man with a gray beard that reached his chest and arms like tree trunks. His eyes swept across the scene, Victor, the little girl, the man being held, and his face went from curious to murderous in half a second. "This what I think it is." Odin's voice was quiet, controlled, which made it even more terrifying. "Check his phone," Victor said, nodding toward the device on the ground. Anders Ghost Nielsen, the club's tech guy, thin and sharp-eyed, picked it up. His fingers moved across the screen, bypassing the lock with practiced ease. For 30 seconds, the only sound was the wind and the distant hum of the highway. Then Ghost's face went pale. "How many?" Odin asked. "At least 14 children in the last 8 months," Ghost said quietly. "Based on these messages. He's part of a network. There's a meeting spot. A warehouse. Tonight at 1900 hours. Victor felt Sophie press closer against him. "There's more," Ghost continued, scrolling through the messages. His voice dropped. "There's a buyer list. And one of the contacts." He looked up, his eyes dark. "One of them is labeled Commissary L." The air seemed to freeze. "A police commissioner?" Odin said slowly. Ghost nodded. "The messages reference the VIP coming to tonight's meeting. Someone with enough power to make problems disappear." For a moment, nobody spoke. The Iron Wolves were no strangers to corruption. They'd seen cops on the take, officials who looked the other way. But this was something else entirely. "We can't just call the police," one of the other bikers, Eric Hammer Johansson, said. "Not if one of their own is involved." "No," Victor said. "But I know someone we can call. Someone who's spent years trying to bring down networks like this." He pulled out his phone again and dialed a number he'd never thought he'd use willingly. Detective Ingrid Solberg. She'd been chasing the Iron Wolves for years. Drug charges. Weapons violations. Assault cases. She knew exactly who they were and what they'd done. But she was also one of the few cops Victor actually respected. Because she wasn't corrupt. She actually cared about justice. The phone rang 3 times. "Bergstrom," Detective Solberg's voice was suspicious. This is unexpected. I need you at the Shell station outside Westeros. Now. And come alone. Why would I? Child trafficking, Victor interrupted. I've got one of them in custody. And evidence of a network that goes higher than you think. High enough that I can't trust regular channels. There was a long silence. I'll be there in 30 minutes, she said. And Bergstrom? This better not be a setup. It's not. I give you my word. Your word, she said, and he could hear the skepticism in her voice. Detective, Victor said quietly, there's a 6-year-old girl standing next to me who was almost sold tonight. Your word is all I've got right now. And mine is all you've got. So we either trust each other, or more children disappear. Another pause. 30 minutes, she said, and hung up. Victor knelt down to Sophie's level. Sophie, I need to ask you some important questions. Can you be brave for me? She nodded, wiping her eyes. Did this man hurt you? No, she whispered. He said he was a friend of my mama's. He said she was in an accident, and he needed to take me to the hospital. But when we got in his car, he locked the doors and drove away. I only got away when he stopped here for petrol. Smart kid. Brave kid. She'd saved herself by running. Do you know your mama's phone number? Sophie recited it perfectly. Victor dialed. A woman answered on the first ring, her voice desperate and breaking. Hello, Mrs. Anderson. My name is Victor Bergstrom. I'm at the Shell station outside Westeros. I have your daughter, Sophie. She's safe. The sound of sobbing came through the phone. Deep, wrenching sobs of relief. Oh God. Oh, thank God. We've been searching everywhere. The police said we had to wait 24 hours, but I knew something was wrong. Ma'am, Victor said gently, the man who took her is here. The police are on their way. Your daughter is very brave. Thank you, the woman choked out. Thank you, thank you. Just get here safely, Victor said. Sophie needs her mama. When Detective Solberg arrived, she stepped out of her unmarked car and took in the scene. 7 bikers from the Iron Wolves MC. A terrified man being held by Victor. And a little blonde girl holding Victor's hand. Bergstrom, she said carefully. Victor handed her the phone Ghost had unlocked. Everything you need is on here. Meeting location. Network contacts. Records going back months. And evidence that someone in your department, someone high up, is involved. Detective Solberg scrolled through the phone. With each message, her face grew darker. She breathed. This is enough for warrants on at least a dozen people. But if a commissioner is involved. She looked up at Victor. We need to move carefully. And we need to move tonight. That warehouse meeting is in 2 hours, Victor said. If nobody shows up, they'll scatter. The network will disappear. What are you suggesting? Victor looked at his brothers. Then back at the detective. They're expecting buyers tonight. Nobody's going to question bikers showing up to a shady meeting. We've got the reputation for it. Detective Solberg stared at him. You're talking about going undercover. That's insane. I've done insane before, Victor said. And unlike your undercover officers, if something goes wrong, we know how to handle ourselves. Odin stepped forward. He's not going alone. We all go. Detective Solberg looked between them, clearly wrestling with a dozen legal and practical problems. Finally, she nodded. This conversation never happened officially. If anyone asks, you were never there. Understood. Sophie's mother arrived moments later, nearly collapsing when she saw her daughter. Sophie ran to her, and they held each other while both cried. But before they left, Sophie turned back to Victor. Thank you, Victor. You saved me. Something cracked open in Victor's chest. In 20 years of living hard and doing things he'd never be proud of, no one had ever looked at him the way this little girl was looking at him now. Like he was a hero. You saved yourself, kid, Victor said quietly. You were smart and brave. I just helped a little. As they drove away, Detective Solberg approached Victor. 2 hours, she said. And Bergstrom? Don't make me regret this. Victor looked at his brothers. At men society had written off. At outlaws who were about to walk into hell itself. We won't, he said. Because tonight, kindness would wear leather and ride on motorcycles. And it would roar. The warehouse sat on the industrial edge of Westeros like a wound in the landscape. Broken windows. Graffiti-covered walls. The smell of rust and decay hanging in the cold October air. This was exactly the kind of place where nightmares happened. Victor and 6 of his Iron Wolves brothers rolled up on their motorcycles at exactly 1900 hours. The sound of their engines echoed off the empty buildings like thunder. 3 men were waiting outside. They tensed when they saw the motorcycles, hands moving toward their jackets. But then they saw the patches, the Iron Wolves MC, and they relaxed slightly. Criminals trusted other criminals, especially ones with reputations like the Iron Wolves. "You're the buyers?" one of them asked, eyeing the group suspiciously. Victor got off his bike, letting his presence fill the space. 2 decades of intimidation came naturally. "Had to make sure we weren't followed," he said simply. "You got the merchandise?" The word tasted like poison in Victor's mouth. "Inside. But we weren't expecting this many of you." "My brothers go where I go," Victor said, his voice flat. "Problem?" The man hesitated, then shook his head. "No problem. Come on." They were led into the warehouse. And what Victor saw made him want to burn the entire building down with everyone inside it. 14 children, ages ranging from maybe 5 to 12 years old, sitting on the cold concrete floor. Some were crying. Some were too traumatized to cry anymore. Each one representing a family destroyed. A life stolen. Innocence shattered. Victor's hand moved to his phone in his pocket, pressing the button that would signal Detective Solberg and her team to move in. "So," Victor said, keeping his voice casual despite the rage burning through every nerve in his body, "how does this work?" One of the traffickers, a thin man with cold eyes, smiled. "Simple. You pick what you want. We name a price. Money transfers. And the merchandise is yours." That word again. Merchandise. Like these were objects instead of human beings. Instead of children. Victor looked at his brothers. He could see the same rage in their eyes. They'd done bad things in their lives. Sold drugs. Run guns. Fought wars in the streets. But this was evil in its purest form. "I've got a better idea," Victor said quietly. The thin man's smile widened. "What's that?" "You all get on the ground right now, or my brothers, and I make sure you never get up again." The smile disappeared like smoke. "You're a cop." "Worse," Victor said. "I'm someone who actually gives a damn." That's when the doors exploded inward. Police. Everyone on the ground. Detective Solberg and 20 state police officers breached every entrance at the same time. Tactical gear. Weapons drawn. Moving with the precision of a military operation. The traffickers tried to run. One reached for a weapon. But between Victor's crew and the police, the building was locked down in under 30 seconds. And then Victor saw him. One of the men in the back, trying to slip toward a side exit. Older. Well-dressed. Moving with the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. The VIP buyer. Commissary Lars Eklund. A police commissioner who'd spent 20 years building a reputation as a champion of law and order. Victor moved fast. He stepped in front of the exit, blocking the commissioner's path. "Going somewhere?" The commissioner's face went white. Then red. Then cold. "Get out of my way, criminal. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually," Detective Solberg's voice came from behind them, "I think he does. Commissary Eklund, you're under arrest." The commissioner's mask of authority shattered. He lunged for the door. Victor didn't even think. His body reacted. He caught the commissioner's arm and twisted, forcing him to the ground. 20 years of street fighting made it almost effortless. "That's for every child you hurt," Victor said quietly. The warehouse erupted in organized chaos. Officers cuffing traffickers. EMTs rushing in to check the children. Social workers making frantic calls to locate families. But Victor moved immediately to the children. He knelt down, making himself as small as possible so he wouldn't seem so big and scary. "Hey, everyone," he said gently. "My name is Victor. These police officers are here to help you. You're safe now. You're going home." One little boy, maybe 7 years old, looked up at him with hollow eyes. "Are you one of the bad guys?" The question hit Victor harder than any punch he'd ever taken. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Because that was the question, wasn't it? The one he'd been asking himself for 20 years. "No, kid," Victor said, his voice cracking. "Not today." The little boy's face crumpled, and he started crying. Not from fear. From relief. Victor pulled him into a hug. And then another child. And another. And the Iron Wolves, these men covered in leather and tattoos and scars, knelt down beside Victor and held these broken children until the paramedics arrived. Hours later, after the statements and the paperwork and the chaos, Detective Solberg approached Victor outside the warehouse. "Bergstrom," she said, her face unreadable. "We need to talk." Here it comes, Victor thought. The part where she arrests him for interfering. For going undercover without authority. For a dozen other charges. But instead, Detective Solberg extended her hand. "Thank you," she said simply. 14 children are going home tonight because you gave a damn when it mattered most. That commissioner? He's been untouchable for years. But now we have everything we need to bring down his entire network." Victor shook her hand, feeling like he'd stepped into another universe. "Don't make me regret this, Bergstrom," she continued. "But if you ever come across something like this again, you call me first. We do this right through proper channels. And if those channels are too slow," Detective Solberg almost smiled, "then you call me anyway, and I'll figure out how to make them faster." 6 months passed. The trafficking network was dismantled. 17 arrests. The commissioner got 25 years. And 14 children went home to their families. But Victor couldn't go back to normal. None of them could. The Iron Wolves MC still rode. Still lived in the gray areas of the law. But they had a new code now. Children were untouchable. And anyone who hurt them was declaring war on the Brotherhood. They opened a community center in Västerås. After-school programs. Safety courses for children. Self-defense classes. The building echoed with laughter instead of emptiness. Sophie Anderson came every week. Every single week, she'd run through the door and hug Victor. And every time, something inside his chest cracked a little wider. One afternoon, as Victor was helping kids with their homework, his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. Is this Victor Bergstrom?" A woman's voice, trembling and desperate. "Detective Solberg gave me your number. My daughter Elsa disappeared 3 hours ago. The police say I need to wait 24 hours. But I know something's wrong. Please help me." Victor looked at Sophie, who was sitting across from him, coloring a picture of a motorcycle. He thought about that petrol station. About a terrified little girl who'd asked him to pretend to be her father. About how one choice, one moment of kindness, had changed everything. "Tell me everything," Victor said, already reaching for his keys. Within minutes, Odin and 4 other brothers pulled up outside. Engines roared to life. Once that sound meant danger, meant fear, meant people locking their doors and pulling their children inside. But now it meant hope. Victor thought about that little boy's question in the warehouse. "Are you one of the bad guys?" The answer was complicated. Victor had done bad things. Things he couldn't undo. Things that would stay with him forever. But maybe redemption wasn't about erasing your past. Maybe it was about choosing differently today. Tomorrow. Every day after that. Maybe it was about showing up when others walked away. About being the person you needed when you were young and scared and alone. Sophie ran outside and waved as Victor started his bike. "Be safe, Victor," she called. He waved back. And then the Iron Wolves rode out into the gathering darkness, toward another frightened parent, another missing child, another chance to choose kindness. Because sometimes the scariest men become the gentlest protectors. Sometimes the people society fears are the ones who care the most. And sometimes being someone's hero, even for just a moment, changes who you are forever. That's a code even outlaws can live by. That's a code built on one simple truth. Kindness wins. Always. If this story reminded you that kindness can come from the most unexpected places, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And drop a comment saying kindness wins, if you believe people deserve second chances. Tell me, where are you watching from? What did this story mean to you? Because stories like Victor's, they're happening all around us. People choosing kindness over indifference. Choosing to help instead of walking away. Be that person today. Be someone's Victor. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay kind. Stay brave. And remember, one act of kindness can change everything.